I want to peel back the layers of this onion with you because it's starting to wreck my head, to be honest, and it's 1:30 and I've been making this video for 4 hours and I still don't have anything recorded. So I'm just going to do this podcasty format so that I can actually string some sentences together. The first layer of the onion is the modern shell. I want to look at 3 organizations with you this week. And yes, there will be a full-length YouTube video with transcripts and sources and all the rest. So if you don't like watching the podcast or you need the accessibility, it is coming. I tried to start making that video and I had to re-record so much. I'm not ready. So Monday, deep research podcast, me rambling. 3 institutions. The Institute of Economic Affairs. Write this down. These are actually the most important. This is the only time I'll ever ask you to take notes on anything. So that's the Institute of Economic Affairs. This was founded in 1955 in London by Anthony Fisher. It is ground zero for Thatcherism. Between 1957 and 2005, the IEA took over £640,000 on record from fossil fuel companies and Rupert Murdoch. That's just what's on record. They don't typically publicly disclose their donors, and shout out to DSmog for doing a lot of the investigative journalism under this. What they do with that money is campaign against climate action. So they have called for more drilling in the North Sea. They have lambasted the government for trying to delay that drilling in the North Sea. Lambast? Anyway. Celebrated the Conservative Party's pledge to scrap the Climate Change Act and called for fracking to be legalised. Labelling it the moral and economic choice. They are responsible for Liz Truss's 2022 mini-budget, the disastrous mini-budget, the one that crashed the pound. And in May 2025, the Charity Commission opened a formal investigation into them. The concerns are potential political bias, lack of transparency around funding, predetermined policy decisions that don't align with any charitable purpose. Oh yeah, all 3 of these organisations that I'm telling you about, they all have charity status. They don't pay any tax. They actually get gift aid. The Good Law Project, which forced this investigation, described the IEA as promoting extreme views, including that the NHS should be all insurance-based and that disposable vape regulations should be completely removed. In plain terms, the IEA, sorry, my brain is slow this morning, is a fossil fuel lobby group that pretends to be a charity. It takes money from oil companies, refuses to disclose its donors, writes it off as tax, and then produces research saying that we should burn more oil. And it helped crash the UK economy. The second organisation, again, write these names down. They are so important for you to remember. The Manhattan Institute for Policy Research. This was founded in 1978 by William J. Casey, a later CIA director under Reagan. The Manhattan Institute is explicitly funded, because I've already done this research, by the Lynn and Harry Bradley Foundation, the Sarah Schaeff Foundation, and multiple other Koch-affiliated foundations. It publishes City Journal and it runs fellowship programs that provide policy legitimacy to conservative talking points. If you remember the Nick Shirley video, the Somali Minnesota daycare fraud, this was January. The information in Nick Shirley's videos had been published in a set of articles that appeared in City Journal, a magazine that was published by the Manhattan Institute, which had been funded by, as I just said, I've lost them now, these billionaires. This is all on my Substack about the Manhattan Institute. The article is called How a Viral Video Became Federal Policy. So we have the Institute of Economic Affairs in London and the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research in New York, both funded by the same gas and oil money. And the third organisation is the Atlas Network. also founded by Anthony Fisher in 1981. This is slightly different to the other two because it's not one think tank. This is the infrastructure behind hundreds of think tanks. The Atlas Network is a coordination body that connects funds and directs over 580 free market organizations in more than 100 countries. It has been described as a guide to how the right-wing interests build and maintain their influence and power. If I was to dismantle one thing, this capitalism, it would be that. Atlas organizations run coordinated disinformation campaigns with the intention of undermining, delaying, or overturning effective climate policies. Exxon mailed checks directly to the Atlas Network in the 90s to turn Latin America against climate treaties. The goal was to make the Global South less inclined to support UN-led global climate treaties. The Atlas Network is a global delivery system for neoliberal propaganda. It takes money from oil billionaires and funnels it through charities around the world, all of them producing the exact same research that climate action is bad, regulation of business is bad, and that corporations should be free to murder us no matter what. This global network of think tanks was created by the Mont Pelerin Society. In 1945, Anthony Fisher, a British businessman and former fighter pilot, read a condensed version of Friedrich Hayek's The Road to Serfdom. He says it changed his life. This story goes, Fisher tracked Hayek down at the London School of Economics. He told Hayek he was thinking about running for Parliament as a Conservative MP. Hayek stopped him. A quote from Fisher reads, Hayek warned against wasting your time, as I was then tempted by taking up a political career. He explained that the decisive influence in the great battle of ideas and policy was wielded by the intellectuals whom he characterized as second-hand dealers in ideas. Hayek told Fisher, don't bother trying to win an election. The decisive influence in the battle of ideas is wielded by the intellectuals that you characterize as second-hand dealers. The real power is over here. So don't go into politics. Instead, you should help me build institutions that will supply intellectuals to university schools, journalism, broadcasting and politics with authoritative study on economic theory of markets, is how it's phrased. In plain terms, he said, don't go into politics, I have a better idea. We will build this secret network of think tanks and charity shops where we can take big fossil fuel money and create a supply of intellectuals for all those institutions that serve our agenda. So Fisher was a member of the Mont Pelerin Society. Hayek had set up the Mont Pelerin Society and he was his direct advisor. In 1955, Fisher founded the Institute of Economic Affairs in London, and that became the policy engine for Margaret Thatcher's government. Thatcher wrote to Fisher personally in 1979 saying, you created the atmosphere which made our victory possible. How Fisher and the co-founder Arthur Selden described it was, the IEA would be the artillery firing the shells, ideas. Some would land on the targets, intellectuals, while others might miss. But the Institute would never be the infantry engaged in short-term face-to-face grappling with the enemy. Rather, the artillery barrage would clear the way for others to do the work of the infantry later on. That is a military analogy for this network's entire strategy, which was essentially flood the zone. If we put up so much of this content, it'll hit somebody and they'll believe it. And that's the one that we want. We don't care about the people who don't believe us. We will incubate, foster, encourage and pay the ones who do. And if we put enough of this stuff out there, looking slightly different, like it's coming from different voices, it'll become more normal, more people will believe it. He's saying here, we will never get into a face-to-face grappling or a short-term fight with our enemy. We are just going to stand there and shoot everybody and see what sticks. Then in 1977, Fisher went on to co-found the Manhattan Institute with William Casey, who would later become Reagan's CIA director. It was originally called the International Center for Economic Policy Studies, and its name changed in 1991. By the late 1970s, Fisher was using his success at the IEA and his connections in the Mont Pelerin Society to keep building think tanks around the world. This was a core pillar, like a load-bearing pillar for Reagan's entire strategy. It promoted Reaganomics and tax cuts for the rich and zero-tolerance policing, a tax on welfare and social services, policies to push poor and black people out of cities. The Manhattan Institute's board included Ed Fulner, who also co-founded the Heritage Foundation. Fisher then went on and set up Atlas at the urging of Friedrich Hayek. Fisher leveraged his IAE success to continue to court corporate donors and establish regional think tanks in New York, Canada, California and Texas. But with Atlas, he went global. Atlas is a non-profit dedicated to establishing libertarian think tanks in every single country on Earth. Hayek wrote fundraising letters for Fisher that said the IAE model ought to be used to create similar institutions all over the world, as it would be money well spent if large sums could be made available for such a concerted effort. That proposal was sent to high-level executives, and so money poured in from corporate coffers and Republican mega-donors, including Richard Mellon Scaife, Pfizer, Procter & Gamble, and Shell. The key rule that Fisher insisted on was that corporate influence had to remain hidden. To influence public opinion, it is necessary to avoid any suggestion of vested interests or intent to indoctrinate. Atlas grew rapidly. By 1985, it had 27 institutions in 17 countries. Today, it supports over 500 organizations in nearly 100 countries. It didn't stop with Fisher either. His daughter, Linda Whetstone, carried on the work. She attended her first Mont Pelerin Society conference at the age of 17, and she went on to become the president of the Mont Pelerin Society in 2020. She served on their board of trustees for decades, and at one point she created and distributed 150,000 CDs with free market texts on them to students in over 60 countries. This is one family, one network, one decade, one mission. That is the $1 trillion propaganda machine. There you go, it's mapped. But that's only the top layer of my onion. So, the Mont Pelerin Society, Wikipedia says it was a gathering of academics. No, this was not a gathering of academics. It was a carefully assembled coalition of far-right intellectuals, business leaders, aristocrats, and central bankers. Their first meeting took place in April 1947, and there was 39 attendees. The meeting was led by Friedrich Hayek, who was an economist at the London School of Economics. It was attended by Ludwig von Mises, another Austrian economist, Milton Friedman, a Chicago economist, Frank Knight, Chicago economist, George Stigler, Chicago economist, Karl Popper, philosopher, John Clapham was a senior official at the Bank of England, Otto von Habsburg, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Max von Thurn und Taxis, head of a 400-year-old banking family, Leonard Read, founder of the Foundation for Economic Education, Lionel Robbins, another economist, Luigi Einaudi, Italian economist, later president of Italy, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Henry Hazlitt, journalist economist, and Aaron Director, Chicago economist. Not a single woman, not a single worker, not a single person of colour, not a single person from the global south. 39 wealthy white men. Friedrich Hayek was an Austrian economist who had spent his entire career arguing that any kind of government planning would eventually lead to tyranny. His very dangerous 1944 book, The Road to Serfdom, warned that any socialism at all will simply lead to totalitarianism. And that book became a Bible for business interests who wanted to dismantle the New Deal and the welfare state. Hayek was funded by the William Volker Fund, a right-wing foundation run by Harold Luhnow. This was the only libertarian fund with any money during this period, and they paid Hayek's salary at the University of Chicago for a decade. They also funded Milton Friedman's research and Ludwig von Mises' salary at NYU. They also financed the Free Market Project at the University of Chicago Law School. Hayek was a corporate-funded intellectual. His independent scholarship was underwritten by a far-right extreme foundation that existed only to promote libertarian ideology. In 1981, Hayek travelled to Chile, then under the brutal military dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. Pinochet? My brain is fried. Hang on. Pinochet. Anyway. He said, and I quote, "I personally prefer a liberal dictator to democratic government lacking liberalism." He argued that a dictatorship might be necessary during a transitional period, meaning that if people won't voluntarily accept exploitative capitalism, that they should be forced to. He said that while this regime was torturing and disappearing people, murdering union leaders, and implementing the very free market policies that Hayek had designed. So this was his testing ground. Hayek's version of freedom literally required state violence to enforce. It was not an organic viewpoint that had emerged. He was paid. The argument was constructed. His theories were designed to protect wealth. He argued that markets were spontaneous orders, that they emerged naturally and should not be interfered with. So don't regulate. But look what happened in the absence of regulation. Corporations have polluted, exploited, and poisoned our livable earth. When he says freedom, he only means freedom for capital. He is opposed to regulation and opposed to planning for the economy. But when it comes to the protection of property, then the rule of law suddenly becomes all important. So this spontaneous order wasn't spontaneous at all. It was manufactured by these corporate foundations, think tanks, and dictatorships. That's not freedom. That's not spontaneous. That's very forced and very expensive. Friedrich Hayek was a professor at the London School of Economics from 1931 to 1950. Did you know that the London School of Economics is actually incorporated as a private company limited by guarantee without share capital? There's no shareholders. It is also classified as an exempt charity. So it is on the one hand a private limited company with no shareholders, on the other it is exempt as a charity. It has a massive endowment of nearly $500 million, and that is invested with JP Morgan. Managed by JP Morgan, invested every. Its documented funders include the Rockefeller Foundation, the Gates Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation, the Ford Foundation, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Science. Notable alum include George Soros, David Rockefeller, Ursula von der Leyen. LSE was set up by the Fabians. And I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to leave it there. But that's the juicy nugget at the centre of this onion. When you get through all of the think tanks, you get back to the Fabians. George Bernard Shaw. If you already know why I hate them, then there you go. Mic drop revelation. If you don't know who they are, or you thought they were the good guys, I'll be back.